Hello, my name is Colin Stewart, and this is a presentation on AssetWise for transportation. During the presentation, I will explain what the core capabilities of AssetWise for transportation are and demonstrate the main features. AssetWise is a generic, configurable, integrated asset management system for any asset class, whether it's linear or non-linear. For example, structures, roadside furniture, geotechnical assets, drainage assets, or any other asset class typically managed within the transportation arena. It's based on common capabilities shared by all asset classes that comply to the principles of good practice asset management. Knowledge and information is key. You've got to know what you own, know where it's located, know the historic and current condition of what you own, know how it's performed in the past and currently, and also know what the planned work schedule is, whether that's historic or current or planned for the future. And using that information and knowledge to make decisions is key. So AssetWise provides a risk-based decision support matrix. Some asset classes may have their own requirements over and above that of the common core features of AssetWise. These additional features are added on top of the core features to satisfy the needs of that particular asset class in question. Examples of this may be network tracing for drainage assets or load management for structures. This diagram shows the core capabilities of the AssetWise solution, and we'll talk about each of the topics in more detail throughout the presentation. At the heart of AssetWise is the asset register that's used to model and manage the asset information. Some of the main features of the asset register include full support for hierarchical assets such as structures or signs with plates and poles. You can have unlimited custom attribution to describe the asset or features, and you can have configurable status codes to indicate where the asset is within its life cycle. To help model your assets, AssetWise supports derived attribute values and also dependent attribute values, where a value can either be dependent on another attribute of the same record or dependent on a related object, and I'll show some examples of those in later slides. Another interesting feature of the asset register is support for data table attributes, where you could have multiple attribute values and also multiple records within a single attribute. And again, I will demonstrate how these features work in the coming slides. Here we have some examples of the main features I've just described. On the left-hand side, we have an example of an asset hierarchy, where the parent asset has got subsequent child assets, and some of the child assets have got other child assets, therefore forming an asset hierarchy. In the middle screenshot, we have an example of dependent attribute values, where the values for the defect type are dependent on the asset type that it relates to, allowing different defect types to exist against different asset types in this example. The second part of the screenshot also shows that the values for the defect attribute are dependent on the defect type selected. And the third screenshot is an example of the data table attributes, where we've got modeled weather conditions, where you can see that we've got multiple values for weather condition over a multiple date range. The next core capability we have is the ability to model and manage linear network locations. Features can be located and referenced by any linear network type within the network model. These could include maintenance sections, traffic sections, state routes, or interstate routes, or any other linear network type modeled within the network model. Features can have multiple network locations, and these can either be point, such as a sign, or a continuous location, such as a guardrail. We can also generate spatial geometry from the network location through a process known as dynamic segmentation. And one key aspect of integration is to be able to synchronize the spatial geometry, the network location of features, and the network model itself. So AssetWise keeps in sync all of these features when network changes occur, therefore minimizing the effort that a user needs to synchronize all of their data. Features can also have an independent or off-network location, which is not dependent on the road network. And again, these can either be a point, a line or a polygon representing the actual feature itself. AssetWise also supports the concept of lateral location. This is the location of a feature across the network, known as a cross-sectional position. And finally, features can be located on multiple networks. For example, the same feature can be located on a road network and on a drainage network. And this is important for complex enterprise-wide deployments where multiple network types are being modeled. Here we have an example of a location for an asset, and in this case you can see that this particular asset has got three separate and distinct locations. It's located on the A46, on the M40 southbound, and the M40 northbound. And the importance of this is that this particular asset is a bridge that carries a road over the bridge and two roads below the bridge, therefore having multiple locations. And as you can see on the screenshot, the location data has been used to generate the geometry of the asset itself. And here we have an example of an asset located on multiple network types. This is an example of a gully where the surface visible part of the gully is referenced relative to the road network that it relates to. But the subsurface asset itself is located against the drainage network that it serves. So now let me demonstrate how to create an asset, how to locate that asset using the map, and how to add some child assets, therefore creating an asset hierarchy. When the user logs into AssetWise, they're presented with the AssetWise Launchpad, which contains a series of tiles, each with several menu options that the user has got access to depending on their persona. To create a new asset, I'm going to go to the Assets tile and select Create New Asset. The first task for the user to create a new asset is to select the asset type or asset class in question. In my case, I'm going to create a new bridge and large culvert. You can see once the asset class is selected that the screen has changed, and it now displays all of the attributes associated with the bridge and large culvert, where the user can now fill in the appropriate details. To begin with, let's add a title. Let's add a reference number. The reference number can either be generated by the system using a mask, or in my case, it can be freehand text entry. I can select a status code from the available drop-down list and enter a start date for the asset itself. Once the asset is saved, the screen changes and you can see the other tabs that are displayed for things such as location, activities, conditions, and documents. So let's have a look at how to locate the asset. In my case, I'm going to add an off-network location using the map. I can zoom in to the vicinity where the asset is located, and using the locate feature within the map, click at the appropriate position. I can type in a description for the asset location. I can enter the appropriate date as to when that location came into being and save the location. What I might also want to do is add a network location. So let's add a network location again using the map. So simply the user can click to represent the start location of the asset, click again on the network to represent the end. The system will generate a path between the start and end point, and it's as easy as entering a description for that particular asset, a start date, and saving the network location. So let's look at adding some child assets into our hierarchy. Firstly, I can select Add, select the Asset Child type, and you can see the screen changes to reflect the attributes of the chosen type. I can select the status code, enter the appropriate details such as title, reference number, start date, and any of the component attributes. And once that's saved, that's the child component added. Let's add a second. Select an appropriate asset class again, fill in some key information, and save that. And finally, let's select one of the child assets and select the child of a child, therefore creating our true hierarchy. Let's select the deck component. Again, add in a title, reference number, status, and other key information, and save that. And lastly, let's change the status code of our parent. You can see that the status code is disabled, but from the feature menu, I can select Update Status. The list of available features are only those statuses that can be moved to after the current status. I can select some remarks and can save. So that status code allows us to reflect the position within the life cycle that the asset is currently at. Our next core capability is that of restrictions. A restriction is anything that imposes some limitation on the network, whether it be through a closure of an asset, closure of the road, or some limit that might be imposed against the asset, such as a height restriction, a weight restriction, or potentially a width restriction. The limit types are configurable within the system to allow any constraint to be modeled within the AssetWise solution. These restrictions are related to asset locations, allowing weight restrictions on bridges, height restrictions on gantries, or any other constraint to be modeled. They can also be linearly located on a network, allowing features such as speed limit on a road to be modeled and managed within the solution. So let's take a look and see how restrictions are managed within AssetWise. In this part of the demonstration, I want to select an existing asset and add a new restriction. I've come into the map, pan, zoom and centered at the location of the asset, and using one of the select tools, I'm going to select the asset to add the restriction to. You can see it's called the King's Bridge, and from the map I can open the details and have a look at the details of the asset. Navigating to the Locations tab allows me to see the existing locations. Changing the view from locations to restrictions, I can see that there are no current restrictions. So what I'll do is select the M40 eastbound, and from the Actions menu add a restriction. Firstly, I'll select the type of restriction, so let's add a temporary weight restriction. I can give it a unique restriction name, maybe a traffic regulation order, for example, a restriction description, and because it's a temporary restriction, I'm going to put in a series of dates as to when this restriction is applicable. And because of the type of restriction, I can put in a lower limit and an upper limit. So let's say the upper limit for this weight restriction is 20 tons. So I've added a new weight restriction. By expanding the view, I can see the attributes. And if I change the view back to have a look at locations, you can see that for that location on the right hand side, a little exclamation mark on a road sign has appeared to indicate that there is a restriction at that location. Our next core capability is geospatial data management and mapping. The AssetWise mapping solution allows the display of spatial data from many different data sources. You can also have multiple background layers, for example aerial photography or any other base map that add context to the map display itself. The map is more than just a mere presentation tool, as it allows features to be located via the map. It also allows features to be selected and identified to gain further information. A series of tools have been provided to allow the user to measure things, whether it be an area or a line, but also to get the linear reference from the network. Users are given a map catalog which lists the map layers that user has got access to. The user can select a layer from the catalog and move it into their active layer control, where they can set things like the selectability, they can view the symbology, or set the transparency levels of the layer itself. Interaction with the asset register, where the user can navigate to the map from the form when looking at the asset, or vice versa. They can start from the map, select a feature from the map, and go to the appropriate web page to look at the asset details. So let's have a look at the spatial data management and map controls within AssetWise. The map is launched by selecting the appropriate option on the map tile. So let's have a look at some of the navigation options. You can zoom in, you can zoom out, you can zoom to extent, you can zoom to a default extent, you can set a home extent, and you can pan. So we can use these tools to zoom in, zoom out, pan, and generally navigate around the map itself. You can also go to the previous view or the next view, and the system remembers where you've been so that at any point in time you can go back. There's also an active map overview, which displays context of where the user is looking and allows the user to drag the red rectangle to navigate the map at a larger scale. You can set the scale for display from a predefined list, or you can zoom to extent. An important aspect of the mapping is the map catalog. And the map catalog shows the user all of the layers that they have got access to. Those layers can be grouped, and the groups can be closed or opened, showing or hiding the layers that the user has got access to. In terms of background layers, there's any number of background layers that can add context to the map. These can be switched on or off. As well as setting the transparency levels of not just background layers, but any map layers within the system itself. Within the catalog, the user selects the layers that they want to see, which moves it into the active layer. Once it's in the active layers, they can view the symbology. You can see that layers can be thematically mapped. You can switch layers on and off. You can set them as selectable. And you can also switch labeling on and off if that has been configured for a particular layer. So let's take a look at the selection tools. The selection tools allow you to select by point, by rectangle, or by polygon. So let's select some features and have a look at this tool. In this example, I've selected some bridge and large culverts, a single layer from the map. However, if I switched on other layers and made those selectable, when I use the select tool this time, it will select any features within the rectangle in this case that are visible and selectable, and mark each with a push pin. You can see in this case we've got some section layers, which is road network, we've got some gullies, and we've got some bridges and large culverts. To identify where any of these are, you can push the push pin and the map pans, zooms and centers on the selected feature, which shows some other information. From there, I can open the details and navigate to have a look at the asset and all of the history of that asset as well. If we looked at the location and asked to view the location on the map, you can see that the map is displayed within the location tab. So let's go back to the map itself. We've got a series of tools that allow measurements to be taken. So let's have a look at the line measure tool, which allows you to measure distance by drawing a line on the map. You can also print information. You can select the paper size, you can select the quality of the output, you can add a title and a description, and finally you can print to PDF. Our next set of core capabilities are activities, conditions, and repairs, because these three core capabilities are very closely related. For example, an activity might be an inspection, the outcome of that inspection might be a series of defects, and each one of those defects may have multiple repairs. For example, it might be an immediate repair, a temporary repair, or several intermediate repairs. An activity is a generic name we give to things such as inspections, assessments, appraisals, or even planned or cyclic maintenance such as grass cutting or gully emptying. And AssetWise supports the configuration of multiple activity types with attribution to best support your business needs. It also supports a relationship model between an activity type and an asset type, therefore restraining an asset type to only the activities that are appropriate for that particular asset type. We also have something known as activity type sets. This is the grouping of more than one activity type into a set for scheduling purposes. It may be more efficient to schedule different types of inspections to occur at the same time so that you can use the plant, materials, and labour who need to carry out those activities in a more efficient manner. Bearing in mind risk-based asset management approaches are more prevalent, AssetWise allows default recurrence patterns for activity type asset type combinations to be defined. However, it also allows those default recurrence patterns to be overridden for specific instances of an asset based upon some risk profile. For example, you might have an inspection regime where you carry out an inspection on an asset every 24 months. However, based upon perhaps the condition of the asset, you might want to inspect it every 12 months or every 18 months. So AssetWise allows you to schedule based upon the recurrence patterns, but also allows you to override those recurrence patterns based upon some risk. And the scheduling engine within AssetWise allows those activities to be scheduled to occur at the appropriate time depending on the recurrence pattern. It also allows auto scheduling, whereby the system will automatically calculate when the next activity for an asset is due based upon the completion of the previous activity of that type. Activities also have a status code, allowing the position within the life cycle of the activity to be recorded. One possible outcome of an activity might be a condition record, and condition is a generic term used to describe the outcome, such as a defect, an observation, or a simple set of results. These condition types are definable and configurable, such that you could create structures defect types, pavement defect types, condition ratings, or observations, each with a different set of attribution and each with a different relationship model to the appropriate activity type. We also allow conditioning versioning, so that, for example, if you want to take defects into the field, you can version or revision the defect, take it into the field, update the defect information, and have the same defect occurring but with multiple different versions over time. And as with activity records, a condition record may have a status code allowing a position within the life cycle of the defect or the condition record to be recorded. Some business workflows dictate that defects have a series of repairs associated with them, because you don't actually fix the defect. What many workflows dictate is that you carry out repairs. So to enable this, AssetWise allows the configuration of multiple repair types, whether that might be a make-safe repair, a temporary repair, or a permanent repair. And it allows those repair types to be related to the appropriate condition type. When we come to talk about task ordering, you will see that multiple repairs can exist on a single task order, and that while capturing the data for a repair, you can record information such as the date due, the target completion date, and indeed the date when the repair is carried out. AssetWise also allows a cost capture using standard price list items as well as templates to model example repair actions. The example screenshot we see now on the screen shows a single repair on the left-hand side for a defect, and on the right-hand side, you can see the defect itself has had 4 repairs. It's got a make safe repair with some standard items associated with it, but you can also see it's got 2 temporary repairs as well as the permanent repairs. So that shows you that a single defect can have multiple repairs, which each has its own life cycle, and each of those can be placed on a task order to get the repairs carried out and subsequently the defect ultimately repaired. So let's have a look at how AssetWise caters and handles for activities, conditions, and repairs. To begin with, let's look at the activities for one specific asset. Using the quick search, I can find my asset and very quickly look at all of the activities that have been scheduled or completed. The activities are shown in the activity grid. With this grid, I can order the display of the details or filter the information out. So let's order it based upon the date due. We can see the activities now ordered with the date due. From the Actions menu, I might want to export that to Excel. So if we have a look at the Excel spreadsheet, you can see that all of the activities have been downloaded in the date order in which they are due. If I'm interested in a specific activity type like maintenance inspections, selecting that option on the vertical menu limits the grid to display activities of that type. From there, I can select an activity and go and look at it in more detail. This is the master activity form, where all of the attributes for that particular inspection or activity are displayed. We can also look at the conditions relating to that activity. In this case, they are structures defects, and the defects are displayed on the right-hand side, along with the asset that it relates to, the date when it was recorded. So let's have a look at how we can enter more results for this inspection. The first thing the user does is select the condition type, which will determine the attributes that get displayed and are enterable on the screen. Secondly, the user can select the assets from the hierarchy tree on the left-hand side that these defects relate to. And you can select more than one asset at a time, which aids data entry. You can fill in the appropriate information, priority, status code, date discovered, and any other appropriate information. And upon saving information, the defects will be created. And in this case, it will have created 4 new defects for this inspection, 1 defect for each of the asset types that was selected during the creation process. So let's have a look at the activity grid again. One of the things I might want to do is create a condition record directly against the asset, which is not part of an activity. On the Conditions tab, you can see all of the conditions that relate to the asset or any of its child assets. Some of those have been created directly against the asset and not part of an activity. In this case, we're adding a defect directly against the bridge without it being part of an inspection. And you can see a complete list of all of the defects or all of the condition records for the asset. Now let's have a look at how recurrence patterns can be set up for an activity type asset type combination. Firstly, the user selects the activity type in question and then selects the asset type that they want to set the recurrence pattern for. Then they set the recurrence pattern. There's many to select from. You can select none, in which case it won't be scheduled, it will be manually created. You could choose a recurrence pattern of a daily pattern, where you specify the number of days between particular activities. In this case, we're going to specify it's done every 7 days, and we want to exclude weekends. It could be done on a weekly basis. We specify it's done every number of weeks. A monthly basis, we specify either the day or how many months between recurrences. In this case, we're going to do it every 24 months. If we set it to a yearly recurrence pattern, we're saying that we're going to carry out a principal inspection on bridge and large culvert. We're going to carry it out in March, and we do it every 2 years. Let's have a look back at the monthly recurrence pattern. In this case, we said we're going to do it every 24 months, but importantly, we're going to say we want to base it on the previous activity occurrence. That means that when the scheduler schedules when something has to be done, it will look back at the last time the inspection was carried out and start the scheduling from then. We can also get the system to auto-schedule, so the system will automatically create the next occurrence whenever the last one is complete, and it will base it on the date and time due. And lastly, let's have a look at seasonal. Some seasonal activities such as grass cutting, gully emptying only occur at certain times of the year. So for this particular recurrence pattern, the user is allowed to select a season from April to September 30th in this case. And that means that activities will only be scheduled for that particular asset between that period. With risk-based asset management in mind, let's now look at how AssetWise can vary the recurrence pattern for assets that are deemed high or even low risk. So using our quick search, let's have a look at a specific asset. Using the Activity tab and the Actions menu, we can look at managing the activity intervals. Here we can see that there are 3 valid activities, and you can see the recurrence pattern, which is the default for that asset type and activity type combination. We can view the default recurrence pattern, but what we want to do is set up an override. So you can see that the default is to do it yearly and do it every 2 years. But we want to change this and do it monthly, and we want to do it maybe every 18 months because it's deemed to be at high risk. We want to base this on the previous activity occurrence. We want to base it on the date it was completed or time due. And lastly, let's tell the system to auto schedule it so that it will automatically create the next activity when the previous one is complete. So this allows us to set up an override that will be used for the activity scheduling. Our next core capability is task orders. AssetWise allows for the configuration of different task order types depending on the nature of work to be carried out. And that falls into 2 main categories. A task order can either be an activity-related task order or a condition type task order. So for example, an activity type task order might be a task or work order to carry out a series of inspections or assessments, whereas a task order for condition type data might be to go out and carry out some repairs to clear some defects. A task order is related to a contractor or a contract, and we can also manage budgetary information through the financial aspect of the task order itself. Importantly for efficiency, multiple task order lines can exist on a single task order, and each of the task order lines can capture the cost in terms of the estimated work to be carried out, but also the actual quantities and therefore the actual cost of work that gets carried out in the field. Each task order line independently has a target due date, and you can also record completion dates. And as with other objects that we have talked about, the task order has a status code allowing the position of the task order within its life cycle to be recorded. On the screen we can see a couple of screenshots of a task order. On the left we have a task order master details form that shows you information relating to the task order, such as the contract, the order type, the priority, and some key dates, such as the date raised and the target date. It also records the default budget that the task order line financial information will be taken from. On the right-hand side, we can see a series of task order lines with the summary information being displayed, such as the defect ID, the defect type, the repair type, and the asset that the defect was recorded against. If we select one of the task order lines and have a look in more detail, you can see that each task order line can have an independent budget. It's got defect information related to it, but you can also see the task items that have been specified along with the quantities and cost to carry out a particular repair. Our next core capability is mobile working. The AssetWise solution is underpinned by data-driven asset management, where quality asset data is a fundamental building block of any asset management strategy, as are the processes that keep that data updated. It is important that asset data can be kept up to date in terms of new assets being collected in the field, existing assets being updated, and condition surveys being conducted in a timely and efficient manner. To this end, AssetWise provides a comprehensive set of map-based mobile apps to ensure that data can be collected and updated in the field, ensuring the quality and timeliness of information managed by AssetWise. Condition and performance measurement and monitoring are an integral component of good practice asset management. Utilizing enterprise-wide quality information, AssetWise analytic tools calculate performance metrics and indicators that measure and assess the physical condition of an asset. Examples include bridge condition indicators for the structures asset class and pipeline condition indicators from CCTV survey inspections for the drainage asset class. By comparing condition and performance indicators against identified targets and goals, the strengths and weaknesses in performance can be identified. By monitoring the metrics over time, warnings of progressive degradation in performance can be identified so that corrective action can be taken at an early stage. Thus, condition and performance measures provide important inputs to the decision-making processes relating to management of existing assets. For many users of AssetWise, their main requirements center around performance management and reporting. They wish to see aggregated high-level executive information, and only where a particular area is underperforming do they wish to investigate further. This is sometimes referred to as an executive dashboard or report scorecard. AssetWise reporting dashboards allow corporate key performance and national indicators to be displayed, giving users and managers alike instant access to up-to-date information. AssetWise also provides a comprehensive set of standard reports that are designed to meet specific business needs. Many reports come with a standard set of parameters, the values of which can be varied to suit the user's needs, and the reports can be output in a variety of formats such as CSV, Microsoft Excel, or PDF. And finally, AssetWise provides the user the ability to create their own ad hoc or custom reports, allowing easy access to all information managed within the system. Our next core capability is document and record management. AssetWise provides a full document and records management capability, where documents can be linked to any feature. For example, you can link documents to assets, activities such as inspections, or even network sections. Files can be dragged and dropped to link to those features, making document creation easy for the user. Once files and documents have been created, those files and documents can be checked in, they can be checked out, the document can be revisioned, document copies can be created, or the document and the files can be shared through the use of the email sharing facility within AssetWise. Documents also have an approval process, as well as providing full records management, where disposition rules and file plans can be created to determine the destruction disposition definition for a particular document. In other words, when it has to be retained and when it has to be disposed of. Those documents can be added to disposition orders, which again have an approval process whereby a manager could reject the disposition order or submit it and approve it, therefore destroying the actual documents themselves. So let's have a look at a demonstration of how AssetWise handles documents and records. Let's begin by having a look at the documents associated with an asset. So this time I'll use my basket to select the asset that I want to navigate to. And on the Documents tab, you can see all of the documents relating to the asset. We can see information such as the status code, which has got an icon to depict whether it's approved or unapproved, the revision number, the title, the document number, and also the number of files associated with the document itself. On the vertical menu, we can select a document class to look at the documents specifically of that class, approval documents, or drawings and sketches in this example. So let's take a look at how to create a new document of type drawings and sketches. And very simply, I've opened my file browser and I'm going to drag and drop the file that I want into the asset grid. And as you can see, a new document has been created. The document title has been taken from the file. And clicking on the document title navigates to the document master form itself, where I can view its attributes, can add in an effective date, and save that. Let's go back to the files. It's easy to add another file simply by dragging and dropping. So let's select another file, drag it in and attach a new file to an existing document. Once the files are attached to the document, using the Actions menu, I can choose to upload another file, download an existing file. This is where I can check it in, check it out, cancel any checkouts, or even delete the association. And lastly, let's approve the document. You can see that the icon on the left-hand side has changed, represent a little green tick. And if we looked at the attributes, you can see that the approval status has also been set to approved, therefore not allowing any further changes to the document or any new files to be attached. So let's now have a look at the creation of a new revision of this document. So from the Action menu, I can select Create Revision, and this is where I can choose what the properties are going to be. I can choose which copies and which files of which copies to copy across. I can also choose which relationships to carry forward on my new revision. So let's go ahead and revision the document. You can see that the new revision has been created and has been unapproved. You can also note that the effective date has been created as the date of the revision. So let's finish this off and go ahead and approve the new revision of the document. On the Assets tab, it shows all of the assets of the particular asset type that this document is relating to. You can see that it's attached to the Waterloo Bridge, but I can also add a new asset. So let's type in a new asset title, select the asset that I want to add, and create a new relationship. So this document is now related to two different assets. And by clicking on the hyperlink to the asset, I can go and view the asset information. And on the Documents tab, I can see that the document that I've created and associated with this new asset is displayed within the grid. And finally, let's look at how to create a new document that's not attached to an asset. From the Launchpad, on the Documents tile, I can select New Document, when the user will be displayed with the attributes to fill in to create a new document. Firstly, to select a document type from the drop-down list. Secondly, the user enters the title for the document. They complete any revision numbers, any descriptions, and add an effective date. And once that's saved, the master document form is displayed, from where the user can attach files, revision the document, check those files in or out as you've previously seen in the presentation. Now let's have a look at how AssetWise handles records management. From the Launchpad, I can select the Records tile and view the records that are pending disposition. Normally, a job would be run overnight or at a predefined time during the day to calculate the pending records. However, during a demonstration, I'm going to run the disposition schedule manually. These are the records which are due for disposition. The user can select the ones they want to dispose of. From the Actions menu, either choose to add to an existing disposition order. In my case, I'm going to create a new disposition order. The user can enter the disposition order name, a description, and save the disposition order. Once saved, you'll see that the approval status that it's saved with is set to not approved. So the next action that I want to take is to submit this for approval. You can see that the status code now has submitted for approval. At this stage, I want to share this disposition order with my manager. So I'm going to use a feature that's available for all objects within AssetWise, and that is the share option. So what I'm going to do is email a hyperlink to the disposition order to my manager for further approval. And we'll send the email. At this stage, I'm going to shut the system down. I've opened up my Outlook and I'm pending the arrival of the email asking for the disposition order to be approved. You can see the hyperlink on the email that when I click it, AssetWise is opened at that disposal order from where I can approve it, and the act of approving it will also execute the disposition order itself, and you can see that the documents have been destroyed. Selecting one of the destroyed documents navigates to that document, where if I look at the copy that's been destroyed, you can see that the files no longer exist as the copy has been destroyed due to its file plan and disposition order plan. This concludes the presentation, which I hope you found useful and informative. My name is Colin Stewart, and I can be contacted at colin.stewart@bentley.com. Thank you.